The category is What the Trans, darling?
Hello and welcome to What the Trans.
What the trans? Wait, you're not Ashley, who are you?
Nobody.
Oh, I see you're not going to be playing with my games. Hello, Casey Explosion. Thank you for filling Ashley's seat while she is on a break. How are you doing?
I'm not doing too bad. Summer allergies not helping. It's pretty warm out. I'm not doing too badly otherwise.
Good. So you are a famous Twitch streamer. Did I get the words right? I don't know Twitch that well. I pop on and watch a whole bunch, but...
Twitch streamer, I don't know about famous.
Well, you're famous to me because you're one of the 5 people I follow on there.
Oh,
I pop in
nice.
occasionally. Sometimes I speak, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm just a silent watcher from the shadows, which may make me sound more creepy than I actually am. Or maybe I am creepy. I don't know yet. Yeah, anyway, that's not a rabbit hole I think anyone should go down, how creepy I am. I don't think I want to know the answer to that question. So, how is the Twitch streaming going? Because you've just been made a partner, right?
Yeah, earlier this year I hit partner, which was a pretty big deal for me. It's been going great.
Does that mean that you're getting some of that streaming dollar now?
A little, yeah. It definitely helps a little.
Yeah, so what kind of games do you play on there?
I'm what they would call a variety streamer, so I don't have one particular game that I focus on. So, you know the way some streamers would only play, let's say, Fortnite.
Yeah.
Something like that. So, and I try to mostly focus on indie titles and kind of smaller scale games.
You're not a Call of Duty streamer. You are there's an interesting indie game out of Boston about a boy looking for his favourite bunny.
Not quite that either. But yeah, so some of the games that I've been streaming in the past are things like Darkest Dungeon or Slay the Spire. Recently, I've been playing the new XCOM. So a lot of more kind of turn-based kind of stuff.
Yeah, stuff that's very in depth, but also not the kind of thing that people necessarily will have heard of, unless they are like me, who plays too many video games and just put in 30 hours into the new XCOM. It's really good. It's called Chimera Squad. Go buy it immediately.
It's really good.
It's so good, right? It's so good. You also do something interesting things on Twitter. Something that has been called Twitter journalism, where you do a big old thread about a variety of different things, trans-related or otherwise. When did that start for you? Because that's I'm not going to lie, we've referred to a few of your threads on the show as a source.
Oh, wow.
We're usually there's something going on, and sometimes your threads on it have really helped us get to the bottom of things. So when did that start for you?
I don't know. I wouldn't call myself a Twitter journalist. I think Twitter essayist was a term that somebody, I think Jim Sterling, said I was a bit of a Twitter essayist, and I liked that. And I'm thinking, yeah, that sounds nice. I like that. But it's a case of I've always been trying to write things long form, and I haven't been able to because it's required a lot more focus and concentration and energy that I just did not have. So I found the medium of Twitter. I could write things in little chunks. It was very easy for me to get my thoughts out in a way that was kind of semi-long form, but not taxing.
I mean, that's something I've definitely struggled with. I could definitely relate to the whole, there's an empty page here, and there needs to be so much to fill. But then it's 240 characters. I can do that.
Yeah. For me, it's a case of I suffer with chronic fatigue and have a lot of chronic pain issues as well. So oftentimes when I'm tweeting something, I'm just lying in bed kind of trying to get my energy for the day and waiting for the pain to subside.
Yeah, well, I mean, it could in that context, what you do with the Twitter threads on so many things, that's even more incredible. So where can people find you on Twitch and Twitter? What are your handles?
It's at Casey Explosion on Twitter and Casey Explosion on Twitch. And I have a Steam curator page as well where I recommend a lot of the games that I stream. So that is once again, Casey Explosion. All one word.
Cool, there'll be links to all of those things in the description. So now you've gone and done all of the following of Casey, we should go and do some terrible news. Casey, this is the part of the show where I basically bum everyone out, but also somehow round it out at the end with some hope. Usually Ashley's the one who comes in with the hope at the end, so I guess that job's on you now. You have to take the terrible shit I'm going to pass to you and turn it into something glorious. Do you think you'll be able to do that?
No, but I will fail spectacularly.
That's all we can ask for. If we can't do it well, we'll do it spectacularly. And on that, let's do some terrible news. So, you have probably already heard about this, but I thought we would briefly mention it, just in case you missed it. J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter author, who added to the lore that the wizards of Hogwarts regularly shit themselves and magic it away. Because why wouldn't you add that as a detail? Why wouldn't you do that? Why would you stop writing the book when you finish the book? Why not just keep writing it on Twitter in very peculiar ways? But anyway, J.K. Rowling has fully revealed the extent of her transphobia.
The specific details of what happened we are not going to mention on the show because they kind of suck, and honestly, if you really want to get up on what happened there, you just need to go on Twitter, basically, and just search for J.K. Rowling transphobia. Anything we say here will just be a complete waste of time. But what is important to say is that subsequently, after the specifics of her revealing her status as a transphobe, that she would go on to threaten legal action
against British Columbia Green Party representative and trans woman Nicola Sperling for tweeting that J.K. Rowling could not be trusted around children. So, just in case Rowling is listening, and I don't think she is, but if she is, hi there, JK, my name is Michelle O'Toole. I'm speaking only for myself and nobody else on this episode. Nobody else on this episode. Casey, you're safe. Nobody else. And I believe your transphobia means that you cannot be trusted around children, as transphobia is dangerous and wrong, and you are clearly transphobic. So, sue me, if you like. I got nothing. I got £700 in the bank. And about £600 of that's going on rent and bills, so you're welcome to try and get that 100. Good luck! Now, the real reason I wanted to mention this is because I want to tell all the Harry Potter fans out there, and there's a lot of you, and it really means something to you lot. It really does. Like, in a way that is unbelievably incredible to see. Like, I love it when people love things. Obviously, you are heartbroken over Rowling's turn to the horrific bigotry, but there is a concept in literature called death of the author. The theory goes, and I'm probably going to explain this very badly, that the status of authorship is one that doesn't add up because the author is building on the work, writings, and experiences of so many people that came before them. That instead of the author being solely responsible for their work, the real truth is the author collected ideas, words, and thoughts and merely collated them together into a book or films or music or whatever it is. And authorship is more like bubbles in a glass of Coke rising to the surface rather than a whole new kind of drink. In the description there are links that far better explain this than me, but I hope that that brings you some kind of comfort. Did you see any of this JK drama?
I did,
Casey?
And I don't want to get sued, so I'm not saying anything. I plead the fifth.
That is absolutely fine. I don't want to bring anyone down with me.
But whilst the specifics of the transphobia that J.K. Rowling was participating in kind of sucks, I think the sad part is
many people like her work. I kind of went through this with Graham Linehan because I was a big fan of Father Ted and all that stuff and really loved it, and then he started his descent. Yeah, that really sucked for me, but nothing like this for like Harry Potter's a religion at this point.
One thing you should keep in mind is that even the character of Father Ted wasn't Graham Linehan's. It was Dermot Morgan, the actor and comedian who played Father Ted. It was is pretty well known in Ireland. Beyond his role as Father Ted, he was an actual priest. He left the priesthood to become a comedian, and it's his character. So if you want to go whole death of the author on that, it isn't even Graham Linehan's baby.
Yeah, I mean, I managed to salvage Black Books because he was only in it for like one season, and it was mostly Dylan Moran, who is incredible. And legend has it, although this is unconfirmed, some trans people online went to see him and he did this like a half hour of his set defending trans people.
Wow.
I've been desperately waiting for it to be released as like an hour special so I can watch it for myself, because that just sounds like, you know, everything I would want. But anyway, death of the author. Hope that helps. It might be easy to do with Harry Potter because it's all books and she wasn't ever in any of the films or anything to my knowledge, so it might be easier to disconnect the work. Like, there are fans of Ender's Game, where the author of that is a massive homophobe, but then they're like, well, it's not his anymore, it's ours.
Well, there's H.P. Lovecraft as well, who has done some pretty foundational work in modern horror, and his influence can be felt from films, TV, literature, games, everything horror. He's had his little tendrils through, and he was a massive racist and anti-Semite. Don't Google what he named his cat.
That's all I want to do now.
Even for his day, he was pretty horrible. And there are a lot of fans of his work who acknowledge that, you know what, he's created some pretty influential work, but he was a massive racist. I think that's going to be how things turn out with J.K. Rowling. At least we still have Terry Pratchett's great volume of work.
Yeah, thank goodness for Terry Pratchett. And on that, no, everyone should read Terry Pratchett. You're looking for a fantasy universe made by someone nice? There's like 50-odd books right there. So anyway, that's all the news. But for now, I would like to introduce our new segment, which is going to be a new regular segment on the show. Casey, you are here to, I was going to say give birth to it, but that's not right or accurate.
To welcome us?
Yes, there we go. To welcome the new segment, Do Some Action. Which is exactly what it says on the tin. The world's on fire, everything's awful, but there are things you can do to help. Starting in Hungary, as we have previously reported, on the last International Trans Day of Visibility in March, the Deputy Prime Minister of Hungary announced a new law that would ban gender recognition for trans people outright. And he could do this because Hungary has essentially stopped being a democracy, kind of, sort of, where through COVID-19 coronavirus legislation, they could just do that and it's fine. There's no mechanism to stop it because essentially they are a fascist dictatorship at this point. There is hope, however, as Trans Vanilla, a Hungarian trans advocacy organisation, has announced that they are going to fight this new law in the highest court in the country. This is on top of the current 23 legal cases that are currently sat in front of the European Court of Human Rights that be put forward by Trans Vanilla after Hungary suspended legal gender changes 2 years ago. Obviously, Trans Vanilla are an amazing bunch, and there are links in the description detailing how you can support them financially or otherwise. Please do so, because they're great, and Hungary's on fire.
Casey, you're in the Republic of Ireland.
How are things going there with the coronavirus? Because you have as your Taoiseach, am I saying that right?
Close enough. Taoiseach.
Taoiseach. I mean, I'm an O'Toole. I'm English. I'm not one of those people who's like, because I've got an Irish last name, I'm Irish. I'm very English. But I think a lot of people in my family would be very disappointed if I got that very wrong. Your Taoiseach, which is basically like the Prime Minister, was a doctor and like went into lockdown like the day the World Health Organization announced that this was a pandemic. And that seems wild to me, considering that my Prime Minister is a big bloated pig man who's going to kill hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, I don't want to heap too much praise on our current government because we had a general election recently and voted in the majority of Irish people were voting Sinn Féin rather than the Fine Gaelers and Fianna Fáil who kind of went into coalition to keep Sinn Féin out.
Oh.
So, while the government is doing a good job,
Yeah, I think I know what you mean.
Can't pretend I'm happy just because in comparison to our neighbours we don't have a giant gas bag full of fascism.
I like how you put that. We tend to, as a policy, always refer to Boris Johnson as racist liar and Prime Minister Boris Johnson, but also may have to add that in at the end.
He is, though.
He absolutely is. And hopefully, fingers crossed, he's not going to be Prime Minister for much longer. Although, to be fair, we've got Michael Gove, who's basically the offspring of if Hitler, fucked a Thunderbirds puppet.
Brilliant.
He's not a good guy. And his wife really hates trans people. Don't know if that transfers over to him or not, but...
Probably.
Oh, it's terrifying. But anyway, we got one more Do Some Action, and then we're going to get to our meet, which is a good one. I mean, I've been looking forward to this meet for a very, very long time. But anyway, I'm going to talk about something that isn't purely trans-related, but obviously there are a lot of black, trans, and non-binary people, many people of colour of all stripes in our community. but this is a story about blackness specifically, and sometimes shit happens that's too important for me to editorially cast aside. As many of you will have heard, George Floyd, a 46-year-old black man from Minnesota, was murdered by police in a tale that is all too fucking familiar. After his death, at the time, the Minneapolis police claimed that Floyd had resisted their officers, but then cell phone footage, as Americans would call it, spread across the world showing, once again, a white police officer kneeling on a black suspect's neck, and once again, the words, "I can't breathe," were heard. Would say that this makes the situation in regards to how the police brutalised black people in the US and beyond clear, but this situation has been very fucking clear for decades, and this, beat for beat, is such a familiar story. As such, the US black community have begun action in Minnesota and across the country, and they have been demanding change, action, and maybe the ability to interact with police officers without being scared of being murdered. This is why Black Lives Matter exists right here as a movement. And I encourage you to, if you don't already know the details, read up on George Floyd and the events around his death. Links in the description. But also I want you to send whatever you can to the following groups who need your help. The Minnesota Freedom Fund, the official George Floyd Memorial Fund, which is ran by his family and their lawyers, the Louisville Bail Fund, the North Star Health Collective, Reclaim the Block, and the Black Visions Collective. Also in the description for people in the UK is a resource made by Twitter user Perkin Amalaraj, which details how you can get involved in the fight against anti-black racism in the UK and beyond. Finally, there are Black Lives Matter marches and demonstrations taking place all over the UK. There have been many today at time of recording on Sunday, but there are many more coming up. So if you're able to find a suitable face covering, please make your presence known on the 3rd of June at Hyde Park in London at 1 p.m. and at Bond Square in Oxford at 1 p.m. On the 6th of June, there is action going on at Parliament Square in London at 1 p.m. and on the 7th of June at the US Embassy in London at 2 p.m, at St Peter's Square in Manchester at 2 p.m, at the City Chambers in George Square in Glasgow at 2 p.m, and at Hyde Park in Leeds. At time of recording, Black Lives Matter Leeds haven't announced a start time, but please go follow at BLM Leeds 1 on Twitter to get that as soon as they release it, or follow up the trans because I'm going to be spending a lot of my time tweeting these things out repeatedly. This list of events was put together by Twitter user @ShayZoya, and all of the details on these events will be on our link sheet, and there is a link to that in the description. Obviously, Casey, I don't think there's really much more to say about that. It's just a horrible thing, but hopefully we can make our voices heard and help out our black friends. Fingers crossed.
I think that one of the things that many people in my little circle of Twitch streamers have been doing was doing fundraising for various organisations. So, for example, I raised some money for the Minnesota Freedom Fund last week.
I mean, that's awesome.
And a lot of other streamers are doing similar. And I think something that you can do, even if you don't have a lot of money to spare, or if you're somebody who is creative in any sense, what you could do is offer your creative skills as a reward for other people donating. So artists could say, I'll do a doodle if you donate to X cause. So there's a lot of things that you can do, even if you don't have a huge amount of spare cash to donate yourself.
You know what? I don't have a lot of spare cash to donate, but you just give me an idea that I'm just going to announce now randomly and then may regret. If you send in any donation you do of over £5 to any of those groups that I have mentioned, I will make you a personalised episode of What the Trans that will be about 2 minutes long.
Ooh,
that's a thing I can do. That's a thing that's going to happen now. I'm going to make that happen because thank you for planting the seed of that idea. That is a way that I can actually help because the only thing I had was to show up at one of those protests, hopefully before my little delivery of masks shows up. But if that doesn't happen, I've got this that I can do.
Yay, there you go.
So yeah, there'll be details of that in the description after I finish recording this and work out how the fuck I'm going to do it, but I'm going to fucking do it. So that's the news and all the call to action stuff done, and I think we can get onto something I have been very much looking forward to kicking off. As you know, as all of us are painfully aware, all the prides have been cancelled, postponed, or otherwise locked up behind a horrible virus-based bunch of bullshit. But here at What the Trans,
we decided to arrogantly attempt to replace all of the prides with What the Pride. So for the next 5 episodes, including this one, we are going to attempt to make every episode sound something like you would experience at a good pride. We will not be charging you £8 for a pint of cider, nor will we sell tickets to cis-het pop stars that no queer person could ever afford to buy tickets for. Instead, we will be giving platforms to folks you need to hear from, whilst also at one point having a boogie, and at another point getting all inspired and empowered and all of the good stuff. But to start, I'd like to set the scene. We are no longer in our recording room / bedrooms. You are no longer sat at home, or on the toilet, or on your way to work, or whatever you do when you listen to this thing. We are in a tent in a field where myself and Casey are hosting a panel discussion on the subject of being a parent whilst also being trans and or non-binary, and joining us today are...
Hi, I'm Kate. I am a parent, 5-year-old son.
I'm Ro. I have 2 kids who are 5 and 3. Oh, and my pronouns are they, them.
I'm Jay Crawford. I have a 2-and-a-bit-old toddler, my first little person.
I'm Graham, he, him pronouns. I have a 6-year-old who's just about to turn 7.
Thank you so much for making the time in your busy, busy lives, because human lives depend on you. I don't know how I would deal with that. Casey, are you a parent?
Nope, I'm not. Despite the moniker I use online sometimes, Sloth Mom.
So you're going to be coming at this from a point of cluelessness just like myself. I mean, that's good. I'm not the only non-parent here, which makes me feel a little bit better going forward and probing into all these lovely parents' lives. So I want to start with my own confusion, because I read in the Daily Mail that Jake and Hannah Graff are the first trans parents. And have you all had your children very recently, like in the last week or so?
Well, I can set the record straight with that, because we've all actually time travelled back in time to witness the first trans parents in the UK. It's quite a momentous occasion in the future. It's just ridiculous, isn't it? The amount of times I've seen in the press that someone is the first trans parent. It's like, didn't you write an article a couple of weeks ago about someone else who was the first trans parent?
Absolutely, I was thinking that. I had to look at the stark parallels between the same newspaper that said that Jake and Hannah Graff were the first parents, alongside that newspaper also being the people to bring out Hayden Cross, and also a little while back having a conversation around Freddie, who had some issues with terminology on a birth certificate. So they knew full and well that they weren't necessarily first parents, but a good way to frame a money spinner, I suppose.
Oh, that's exactly what it was. They were looking for an angle. So, to the group, what came first for you? Coming out or having children?
Kids for me. My son was 1 when I came out, which everything had kind of turned upside down. So something that I didn't find out until after I decided to be true to myself was that when your kids are born, your hormones tend to go all over the place, and not just for the person who carried the baby. It's pretty much everyone in close proximity. It's natural for your hormone levels to start dipping if you naturally produce testosterone, and estrogen to naturally go higher. So for me, my son was born, my testosterone levels dropped through the floor. I suddenly felt like all the poison had been sucked out my blood. I was well confused. But it started off as like daddy, then mummy daddy, then mummy Kate, and it's stuck as mummy Kate ever since.
So related to that, if myself or Casey were walking past a hospital, would we suddenly, if we were walking past a hospital at the wrong moment, would we suddenly start to have like hormone surges?
No.
No, I think it's usually when it's like your child and the skin to skin contact as well. It's one of the main
don't
things, I
touch
think.
any newborn children.
Yeah, I was thinking there could be like a massive new therapy there. Just get to the other side of some kind of framework and sit next to a newborn for a while, and that could be spouted as the next hormone therapy.
That would be a unique solution to the
It depends whether the screaming
issue
child
around
comes.
getting into a clinic.
Oh, God, could you imagine TERFs? They'd be like, I heard that trans people are selling newborn babies on the black market to get the hormones.
I'm pretty sure I've already read that thread on Mumsnet. I'm pretty sure. Graham, what about you? Did you come out pre or post child?
I was sort of out to myself beforehand. But I was like not intending on transitioning at that point, just because like family situation, and it like I kind of felt like I could deal with the dysphoria for like the safety of family, but like family is like nothing now, so it was irrelevant. But yeah, so my kid was born in 2013. I came out sort of to friends 2016-ish, and then I came out like publicly 2017.
Okay. And so your child was sort of getting to the age where they knew that something was going on.
Something like what? What do you mean?
Well, I mean,
Like-
they were activated, they were alive. I mean, they were always alive. I guess this is where I'm going to get into trouble. Basically, like the first 3 years of a child's life is basically, they don't really have, I was about to say they don't have full personhood, but they do. Your child was not laying down long-term memories, but then around the time that they started to do that, you were coming out and stuff. So...
Yeah, they were talking and everything. My one was an early talker as well, so early talker, late walker. Yeah, so they were calling me like mummy and stuff. So we were learning all the little words, and they could sort of communicate with talking, but it was never like a big deal to them, just because I haven't really like raised my child with gender either. So for me to then be like, I'm a guy, my child's going to be like, whatever. I mean, yeah, like age 3 and 4, they kind of, as my child's got older, they've had questions and thoughts, especially when it's come to me like actually transitioning. I need to be upfront with my child about that. So they have had a manner of processing it. They do remember me being like mum, even though I wasn't a different person or anything. Although I came out after my child was 3 or 4, they have had processing that they've needed to do about my transition.
Right, but it's happening at such a young age that like they are going to be very much, oh, that's just normal. That's what life is.
Yeah, I mean, and also we've got a lot of trans friends, and some people I know have come out while my child's been older. Sort of trans people is just a thing in their life. That's just how the world is. Some people are trans, some people are cis, and that's the world.
Yeah, I quite like the idea of that. I'm sure that certain bigots would be like, oh, look at them getting them while they're young, which is kind of true, but I'd like to think of it more as showing them a side of the world that exists and is true.
I think it's a really key concept. I think definitely for our family, because I transitioned probably back in 2008, so well over a decade ago, and always wanted to be a parent. Didn't necessarily want to birth myself, not as in give birth to myself, as in like give birth to a small human. However, obviously my wife took that role on, and we have a donor baby. So there's always going to be questions around why they're a donor child, and where they came from and how it kind of came about. It's quite simple. It came about because your dad can't have kids in the traditional way. What has been quite interesting, having such a tiny human that was the complete opposite to Graham's child. So pretty much walking from 6 months, climbing, trying to get on a bike from 10 months, but doesn't say a word until over the last kind of 3 to 4 weeks. Due to COVID, we've spent a lot of time together. So for the last kind of 8 months or so, I've been called mummy, because that is the only word that he wanted to say. But he realised that saying mummy meant he got something. So that can be quite awkward for a trans person when you're in the middle of ASDA. And I have a certain amount of passing privilege, because internally you're absolutely freaking out. You can't shout at a 2-year-old, and everybody else is like, what? But they kind of don't think about it quite as much as I think about it. So I can just say that COVID has been brilliant, because I haven't had to go in a supermarket. But it's interesting how that came across for him. He was due to start nursery, but had done some induction days. And I think everybody else was very binary in terms of, I'm a boy, I've got short hair. And he has particularly long hair, and he is constantly referred to as a girl. And then I'm constantly asked by friends and family whether that's a conscious decision. And I don't think it is. But, the journey of having such a little person that you are responsible for can be quite interesting. And I find it quite hard to almost separate my transness from their growing up, if that makes sense. And not that I don't want to push it on them. I want them to be aware of trans issues, but I don't want it to be central in their lives.
You'd quite like it to be a mundane element of life, but a element of life nonetheless.
Yeah, I want to normalize it and for it to be there in the background, but not constantly be something that is worried about or overthought. And I don't know how everybody else deals with that. So most of my friends who are trans don't have children.
Yeah, I find that like one thing that I really liked about meeting Kate is that you either go to like parent groups and everyone's like cisgender, or you go to trans groups and nobody's a parent. It's really hard to find that crossover of like trans parents and have people like know your experience. You've got have like trans groups and you're like, oh, I can't make it. I've got a child. You know, that event isn't child friendly, or you know, suddenly having to leave because you have to do something with your child, put them as a priority. But then you try and go to like parents groups, they're all just very cis and straight and not my kind of people.
I think I can totally kind of have a parallel on that. So where we live, there's something called Proud to be Parents, which is an LGBT parents group. And there are a few trans parents at that group. I found that at Manchester Pride a couple of years ago, I went to one of their meets and I was very much, me and my wife were very much looked at as if to say, you're a straight couple with a baby, why are you here? I think people question it slightly less now. I have bright pink hair. But, you know, not being visibly queer is sometimes a barrier to our kind of friendship, knitting social circles kind of thing.
I thought it was really interesting what I think Jay said about like being misgendered by your child in the supermarket, because children struggle to gender people correctly for ages. Like it takes them a really long time to get their head around who is a boy and who is a girl, and you know, how do we know? How can you tell? So at the point at which they realize that they get it wrong a lot, they often start asking, like, is that person a boy? Is that person a girl? Like, I don't know. And I came out after my kids were, I mean, I only came out last year. My kids were 3 and 5 and both talking a lot, never stopping talking. And it was like they'd just pretty much got it so that they were gendering people pretty much consistently with outward appearance. And then I was like, but I'm not a woman, I'm a they. And my 3-year-old just went, no, that's not a thing. And it's taken him a little while to, it's because he'd never seen it modelled. He'd never seen that used. He'd never seen anyone called that. And I couldn't explain it to him conceptually. And now my other half and both my kids use they, them pronouns pretty much consistently. They have fantastic grammatical gymnastics where they try to make they singular, and their sentences come out beautifully convoluted. But people in supermarket were probably going, oh, look at that 2-year-old calling his daddy mommy. And they probably didn't have that rush of horror that you had, and that kind of adrenaline thing that happened.
Absolutely. I think it's pretty much my brain overtaking. But it's interesting what you say there about gender not being necessarily set at that age or visible to them in their vocab. Because we actually realised the other day that we have gone through all of the word books and all of that, but the only bit that we don't do is that is a lady, that is a man. And we've not actually tried to do that on purpose, but we pretty much don't do it. So we do granddad and grandma, and my great gran is Gigi, but we don't say there is grandma, grandma is a lady, there is mummy, mummy is a girl. It's just the names. So a dolly, whether it's male or female, is a dolly. So it's just one of those things, and I don't know whether that's something that we've done or whether that's just something we've not challenged yet. But I'm quite liking it, so we're going to roll with it for now until nursery intervene, and then that could be different. What I want and what a nursery want are very different. So
I think it does enforce the binary ideas quite a lot when they go to nursery, but my 3-year-old is in preschool and it's actually open at the moment, so he actually is in preschool, and he ran into my bedroom this morning and went, Ash from Pokemon's a he. Yeah. I'm a he. Yeah. Jacob's a he. Yeah. Daddy's a he. Yeah. You're a they. Yeah. You don't have a penis, though. No. And then he left. That was it. Like, just checking. What's going on in here? What pronouns are we using? What genitals do we have? I'm off. Bye.
Just some facts for you. Then something we used to say for my kid when they were younger is when they were about 3 or 4, is that the way they kind of like to interact with people is we refer to it as state fact make friend. So they like to just say things like, this is true, this is true. They're partly testing, is this true? They're asking you, you're a they, that's a he. But also it's just a really nice way for them to socialize. They just like to state things.
When he was at nursery, like he used to go there and they'd be like, okay, so how many mums and how many dads do you have? And he's like, well, I've got all the mums and no dads. But then he'd run through them, and he refers to my partner as mum, and he refers to both me and his natal mum as mum, and he used to refer to my ex's partner at the time as mum as well, who was also trans, and then he'd go, I've got this mum, this mum, this mum, this mum, and then he would do the rundown of the genitals. So
no.
So yeah, nursery knew me far better than I think they wanted to. But yeah, they were terrible in terms of like gendering and things. It's like they took me aside once. They said, "Oh, we were all doing about birthday wishes, and your son came back to us and he said if he had a wish, it would be to have a dad." Which broke my heart. It was horrible to hear. But at the same time, we got talking and they were like, well, to be fair, every single one of our books has got a mum and a dad. Every book. And, and when they talk about things, they go, what does your mum do? What does your dad do? And there's this really rigid view of family, especially in early education. I mean, primary school, much better. We went to primary schools all over where we're based, and we spoke to them specifically about LGBT and said, how do you feel about this? Because we think that our son's probably going to be a target for bullying, given that he's got queer parents. So how are you with that? And the one that he's with now, they were like, well, we may not have all the books, but if you have books, you can bring them in. We're more than happy to read out a story with 2 mums or a story with 2 dads or a story with different pronouns if it's going to make your child feel more included, which is fantastic. Yeah, it's like we sent him in just before COVID. I think the book's still there, probably under a layer of dust, but it was like the rewriting of Goldilocks and the 3 Bears, and it had 2 mums in it, which was really lovely.
Oh, that's nice.
That's nice. I used to change the pronouns in books when I was reading them to my little one, especially before they could read. Doesn't matter. So, I would just make it, just change it around, use he, she's, and theys all over the place. And I think it helped a lot because you'd have like a male presenting character, and you'd say she, and it would normalize the fact that not all women look a specific way. So I think for my child, like we've always been, we don't gender strangers. If you want to know, you've got to ask, and if it's not relevant, then you don't need to know. But I did find that about like especially being a single parent, the whole all books there's a mum and a dad is really obvious to me, and always has been, because it's like, so my kid, even before I came out as trans, was asking for a dad, or mentioning, there's a mum and a dad here, and I've only got a mum. And it's, I don't know, I feel like it's very alienating anyway, for like, I'm not the only single parent in the world, and I've got the trans thing on top of it. So, they sort of always had this feeling that other people have like a mums and dads. And even though that's not even true, it's just the books are always like that. And then, especially when I sort of came out and I said, I'd like you to start calling me dad now, they did really mourn the thought of having a mum, because even the books that don't have 2 parents will always have a mum and not just have a dad. So it's been really hard to sort of to be something that they've not seen an example of.
See, we were looking at nursery or preschool where we are, but we're actually quite lucky that there's a school at the back of us that do something called a buddies program, which is from really quite young. And I just laid the cards on the table and said, look, I'm telling you straight off, I'm in the middle of a council estate that isn't particularly au fait with LGBT issues, let's just say. And then that's where the school's located. So I said to them, look, I'm a trans parent. She said, oh, that's great. She said, we've done this with Stonewall, to which I added a little bit of extra that they needed to do. But also they said, look, we've got an LGBT book list, but we don't really know what to choose. So before he was even in the school, I was helping them pick the books. Books like George and, Growing Up to Be However You Want to Be, that kind of thing, which was quite nice from an inner city school in the north. To have that almost level of background knowledge, whether they, kind of pass that on through school and play. But we were quite interested that we went past a year one classroom on the tour, and there was a young Black and ethnic minority group of children together in their classroom, and we didn't know whether it was segregation or whether it was play together. But then we actually realised they were all clapping for a little boy that was on the back of the stage with a pink fairy tiara and a dress of some sequin variety on. And we just thought, oh, maybe this is the right place to be. And then COVID came along. So, we'll see how that program, whether it's available or not afterwards. But it was quite nice to have kind of like almost an LGBT background to what they do. And they said it was quite simple. I think it's just about engagement and worrying possibly about what other cis parents or the 99% of non-trans people would think to that, I suppose, within schooling.
Do any of the parents play video games with their kids? That's
Yeah, I do.
That's oh wow.
I play Prodigy, which is a maths game, but you get to fight back.
What was that one?
I play Prodigy, which is a maths game, but it's a bit like it's got like you're a wizard and you have to fight monsters and rescue them. It's a lot like Pokemon, but with maths.
That sounds amazing. My kid would love that.
Yeah, your kid will absolutely love that. We play about 3 hours of it at the moment, and it's like he doesn't realise he's doing maths. But it's the only schooling he'll do at the moment, so we play a lot of that.
Right, I'm downloading that. Thanks for the
it's really good.
Is that something that you think you're going to be able to do a good stream of, Casey?
I don't think so, but probably not quite where I'm at.
I've heard of that.
I do remember when I was a kid, I had Mario Teaches Typing, and that's how I learned to type on the keyboards with Mario. That was something.
I actually found that on Amazon. We were looking at stuff because obviously like homeschooling, and we got the massive keyboard, the ones with like the letters that you could pretty much smash with your palm of your hand. Is brilliant. And the color coded mouse, we got that, and we were looking at loads of stuff, and that actually came up. It was a second hand one on there, but we did and because we are retro gamers, we love gaming, and we were like, should we? But yeah, I don't think it's probably stood the test of time.
I'm pretty sure that game is available to play free online, because I may have played it at some stage. Myself, I'm pretty sure there's like an online version. I might be lying, but it's definitely Mario, and it definitely had typing involved because I'm highly dyslexic. So I may have played that not that long ago either.
So obviously being trans in the world, being non-binary in the world, brings its challenges. But I can imagine that being trans and non-binary with little people that rely on you for food and love and shelter, you could probably come up with some very interesting challenges. What kind of challenges have you faced as a bunch of trans and non-binary parents?
That's a good question, isn't it? You talk about challenges, and immediately I start thinking, like swimming and things like that. So one of the things when I first came out, so I came out in I think it was September. So no, it was August. That was it. It was August. So it was like school holidays. My ex and stepson at the time, baby boy, we all went to Butlins, and it was literally my first weekend out as me, my first time in a swimming costume, and then I was in and out of Butlins swimming pool for the following week. And, swimming whilst being trans is terrifying. Yeah, they're not exactly, especially women's swimming costumes aren't exactly, good at leaving stuff to the imagination. But I tell you what, having a small child on me the entire time just kind of made me feel bulletproof. Because I wasn't there for me. I'd forgotten about me at that swimming pool. I was looking after this tiny little life the entire time. And, although I definitely didn't have passing privilege, still don't, visibly queer. And I got gendered correctly all the time. Like there were parents who were playing with their kids, and I'd throw my child on something, one of the amusement rides, and you put money in, and there'd be several seats spare, and I go, you're welcome to pop on your little one if you'd like to. And they'd always go, oh, that lady says you could join her son if you like. Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, really, really nice, really lovely. And the first day I was there, I was chasing my son for a tiny tunnel in like an outdoor gym type thing, like swing ropes everywhere and bridges and stuff. And I was like chasing him down with my hands and knees. And at the time, I used to wear breast forms, like these silicone breast implants that I put into my bra.
Like the chicken fillets,
Yeah,
but proper.
Like massive ones with nipples. And that's another thing. I'll go back onto nipples in a second. But I was just getting through this tunnel and my tits fall out. Like they roll out my bra. And I look around and there is no one around, which is fantastic. Like no one noticed it. But there's a rope bridge right above my head, and I hear this, that woman's boobs have fallen out. She's got fake boobs.
Oh, no.
But almost immediately, my stepson at the time goes, back off, that's my stepmom. And I'm like, both humiliating and so affirming of such a proud moment all at once. But breast forms and newborn babies or toddlers is just a nightmare. The amount of times I went to go to work and I'd be like, oh, he's ripped off another nipple. Oh, for fuck's sake, I've got to try and stick my nipple back on or make an excuse to work that I'm going to have to be late because I have to find something to pad my bra or leave a boob behind. It all just goes horribly wrong. He was obsessed with it. He'd sneak off and he'd hide it somewhere in the house. But yeah, I'm sure.
I was expecting it to be like, well, sometimes it can be really hard to get the teachers on board with the trans stuff, or sometimes it's really hard to get them into a good nursery when you got the trans thing going on. Not nipple based shenanigans.
This is because you don't live in the parenting world. There's a lot of nipple based shenanigans goes on when you live in the parenting world.
Or worse, I have a carer because I'm a disabled parent. And my son took to hiding my packer, which is a silicone form of male genitalia, all around the house for her to find, and then would go, hee, 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 uh-oh, and run away. So we learnt that probably just before he was 2.
It sounds like you are living in like some kind of trans Beano Dennis the Menace comic.
It feels a bit like that, just a little bit. But I mean, I have different kind of issues with parenting as well because I'm a wheelchair user. So the things that kind of come in to make things complicated when being trans can also be things that are kind of made difficult by the fact you can't run after your child. So imagine that happening and then not actually be able to do anything about it because you can't get there to kind of stop them. That can be difficult. One of the things that I have found challenging, I suppose, is I've worked with Sparkle, the National Transgender charity, for quite a while. And having that kind of Pride weekend event is brilliant. But other people forget that you're still a parent, and that as much as you're working, you've still got that crossed identity of being an activist and a parent and having to manage both those needs. So I suppose that's probably my challenge.
Yeah, when I first met you, I didn't know you were a parent. I had no idea.
Yeah, I think that's probably because the vast majority of what I have done has been publicly me. I'm not publicly my family, maybe, but that's kind of changed over the last few months as I've stepped back and gone into a different role. It's time to put family first because I'm only going to get one childhood with him. And I suppose can be an activist for as long as I live, I suppose.
I think that is the curse of being a trans person at this time. This is very much it's a cliche to say, but there is a bit of a trans moment in the UK.
Absolutely.
There's been a lot of movement there.
There's also a lot of backlash from it as well. So it's a double-edged sword, really, of wanting to be out there, but also wanting to protect what you've got at home, if that makes sense. So, we had some issues, which I'll talk to you about at a different time, that maybe would cross over into hate crime or something like that. But, involving my children, and that was a pivotal moment as to how outwardly trans I was, I suppose.
I mean, that's an angle that doesn't necessarily get talked about that much because I think there is an assumption that trans people don't have children.
Apparently, there's only been one. At any point.
Yeah,
There's only one trans parent at any point.
Absolutely. And until the Daily Mail contact you and say, does your donor of your child know that you're trans? That is a massive turning point in your thought process. Not only as a trans person who, although is probably visibly queer, is not necessarily visibly a trans person, Yeah. It changes your views on your own identity and how much your identity is important / valuable to you and what else comes in front of that and things like that. And it looks at subsectionality, I suppose, because if we're trans and we're also parents, it's like when you were talking, Graham, about going to parents groups. It's where they cross over and whether that negatively or positively impacts us, I suppose. It kind of creates issues either side, doesn't it?
In terms of being at school, I have found being the trans parent or being the odd one out, I think is more than anything, is that my child does suffer as a result sometimes. I have found that he'd get on really, really well with a kid in class, and I probably will get on quite well with the parent. But when it comes to any kind of out of school thing, we're right behind my kid's school, right behind. We got a big field, and then the kids' school. And after school, they tend to go to this field afterwards. The parents would take their kids to the playground and things, but it's almost like they don't want their kids around my kid, which can be quite difficult, as a parent. I mean, my son's oblivious to it. He hasn't got a Scooby-Doo what's going on, but he will do when he's older. He will notice that other parents are telling their kids to keep their distance.
Like from you or from
Both.
Your child?
It's pretty obvious that they don't want anything to do with us. And it's upsetting because when I first came out, I lost a lot of family, not because I was trans, but because they told me to leave my son. So they told me I should walk out of my son's life and never come back because he'd be better off without me as a parent. I'd made the decision to come out at that time because I'd been involved with trans groups for a little while before I actually came out. And I knew people who were parents of adults and parents of teenagers and parents of younger kids. And it seems to me the older your child when you transition, the more abrasive that transition can come on that relationship, or the more chances of you having issues with your ex or with the kid themselves. And it was like, well, actually, no, I know that if I make my kid proud of their family, then you can push all you like, but if it's not something they're ashamed of, they're not going to feel shame for it when you tell them that they're different, because they know and they'll be proud of it.
I think that's something that I've definitely seen having worked with the community. I think we see a lot of, we do a lot of one-to-one and things like that, and we see a lot of older trans folks, predominantly trans women, who've transitioned when their children are slightly later, or come out when their children are in their teens or towards their early 20s when they're leaving for university, because either that's what they thought was right or that's what they've been pressured into by, wife, partner. And I think that is far more devastating in my experience of seeing that, secondhand, than it is to kind of have all the cards on the table at day one, pretty much, or at, in a much earlier stage, not necessarily day one, but something like that. And it's heartbreaking, it really is.
For me, the biggest struggle I have is because I haven't sort of raised my child specifically in gender, that I constantly have this fear that I'm doing something to my child, like I'm pushing something on them, when in fact what I'm doing is pushing nothing on them. I'm letting them make their own decisions. And I do constantly have this kind of like subtle fear that like I'm doing something wrong because I've not followed this typical convention of giving your child a gender. Even if you're happy for that gender to change, I just kind of like, I bought a mixture of clothes from birth, and we stuck with sort of original pronouns for a while, because of like the family situation. But then as soon as my child could make a decision, they chose to use they pronouns. They've switched around a bit. But I just kind of like, I have this kind of niggling fear that my transness is going to be used against my parenting. And then my fear kind of got realized at a point because, so my kid has like some behavioral issues, which are most likely like ADHD or dyspraxia or something along those lines. And so I'm working with the school. The school is brilliant. I love the school. They're so good. And we've had a lot of meetings and just working, what can we do to make their school life better? What can we do to enhance their learning experience, make it not affect the other children quite so much? It just sort of came because the way the system works, we ended up talking to sort of other professionals. And so my transness comes up in these conversations every time. And it's so exhausting. Because they're like, oh, I noticed you're using they pronouns for your child. I'm like, yes, because that's their pronouns. Move on. Let's go. Let's do something else. And I actually ended up having an interaction with social services because I don't know who, but somebody at the school had decided to basically report that I was pushing this on my child. Unfortunately, my little one really likes words and uses them when they don't really know what they mean, and had said to one of the adults at school that I had convinced them to be a girl, which obviously that doesn't sound right. What they meant was like inspired, like they said it kind of like inspired, but more like giving them the freedom, but they didn't know that word and they used the wrong word. And immediately that's like, there you go, there's social services. Suddenly now they're asking you stuff. And the person I dealt with social services was like, well, this is clearly a misunderstanding. Clarified it with me, realized I was absolutely horror struck that this had gone exactly where my fears were leading me. And it was all written off. But the fact I never got I never know who in the school had brought this up. Nobody had told me they were putting this through. And I never got an apology from the school. So I'm a bit sort of more tentative about them. But the fact that I sort of lived for years in this fear that people are going to tell me I'm pushing this on my child, and then for it to happen, it's absolutely terrifying.
That's so fucked up because you're not, it's like you said, you're not pushing anything on them. Like, I'd argue that if you were buying your kid everything that was pink and just drowning them in Barbies.
Yeah, to me that doesn't feel healthy for children to say you must do this, you must play with this. And admittedly, like my parents were a bit kind of relaxed that like I inherited my Barbie dolls from my oldest brother who's cisgender. We had all the toys and everything. We weren't necessarily like told we had to fulfill the gender roles that we were told we had genders. Like I remember one time my mum caught me trying to pee standing up and she said, you can't do that, you're a girl. And I cried like a whole day. I must have been like 6.
Aww.
But yeah, I think that it's kind of like, yeah, if you can accept that you don't push children into playing with specific toys, then why do you then extend that to clothes? Why not let them wear the clothes they want to wear? There are some bits, when I first started doing it that I kind of thought, oh, do I sway them one way or the other. And I'm just like, no, because, now I know my child, I know my child's interests. I know that they will prefer buying these sorts of clothes, but we'll look around, we'll compare them all. But it's about who my child is as a human, not who they are based on their genitals.
Do you ever find that people try and force a particular gender on your child, like buy them?
Oh, yes. Mostly a family thing. See, now my mum has been kind of, she's been kind of good with my transition. She's a bit sloppy with pronouns and name and stuff. But overall, she's not really, she's just struggling to get it sometimes. She's on board, but she's struggling. But then when it comes to my kid, my mum takes it really personally, in a way that she's worried that if she's in public and she genders my child in a way other than their birth gender, that somebody will call her up and be like, that's not right. And then she will have to stand up for trans and non-binary people, and she doesn't have the confidence to do that. For instance, one time, so my little one would stay at my mum's house overnight, sometimes give me a little bit of a break, which I haven't had for a long time now. But I asked my little one, what do you want to wear to this family party? So I was going to meet them there at the party the next day. And I come, and they picked out this beautiful dress. I got to the party and my kid was wearing entirely boys' clothes. And I'm like, those are all new clothes. So my mum had specifically gone out and bought a whole outfit just to kind of, because she just didn't want to bring my child to a family gathering in a dress.
Oh, that's nauseating.
I know it. And the thing is, I find hard to kind of like blame my mum. I do get like upset about it, but I can kind of see that the rest of my family is much more judgmental, and I don't want to not inflict her, but kind of like push her into the situation where she's got to feel uncomfortable and be bullied by her siblings because of a decision that like I've made a decision to not push this. But yeah, it's very undermining, to say the least.
When my son was like 3.5, 4, he met his first non-binary person. I think it was at Pride, and he was obsessed with this person. He was obsessed with they, them. He thought it was awesome to be something other than binary. And, he had a great day. And kids being kids, there were days where he like, well, I don't have a gender. I'm just, and he'd say his name. That is me. I don't know why you need to gender me. And then I got a text message from a family member, and it went, your child has just said that they are non-binary. Stop pushing your mental health on this child. And I'm like, well, hang on a second. For a start, he's 3.5, and there are days where he will go, I'm a dinosaur. And that's not me saying, sometimes I'm a bit of a dinosaur. That's not me pushing on mental health.
Yeah, my son's absolutely obsessed with trolls. And I don't know whether you've noticed, but trolls, everything is bloody pink. To a point that's not even funny. They have a male character in it, but apparently no boys are interested in trolls. Therefore, they haven't done a large amount of licensed stuff. So because my son's constantly got trolls on and Poppy on and this bright pink hair wig thing that's attached to a hat, everybody says she. And for my parents, I think that's quite confusing, because my dad doesn't want to say anything and make it an issue, because he's not 100% with my transition, even 12 years on. But I sometimes worry whether people around me kind of think that again is a choice I'm making, but actually that's a choice that the commercial world has made and kind of made it my problem, which I didn't want it to be.
Yeah, no, you kind of get thrust into it in the big wide world. With my kid not having any, like, I guess not really having an understanding of what it meant to be a boy or meant to be a girl, in a way that nobody around us was really super binary into gender roles.
Yeah.
There was no really, it didn't matter to them. And then they went to school, and I think the first day that they went to school, the playground's not long enough to have a whole line of the entire classroom, so they split it into 2 lines, and they said, okay, boys on this side, girls on the other side. And my kid's like, what? I don't know, I gotta choose a line. And I'm like, I'm so annoyed that as soon as they go to school, they get thrown into this. And like sports day, like there is really not that difference in sports abilities. And 6-year-olds, you don't need to gender them.
What happened to odd and even numbers? Do you remember when you used to go 1, 2, 3, 4? And
exactly, I was like, yeah, or choose them like who likes carrots and who likes peas. Like it just feels like so much more friendly than being like, hey, tell us what genitals you've got.
Yeah, pegs as well. Do you ever notice that? Like even at nursery, my kid had a peg, and there was blue pigs and blue pigs. Sorry, blue pegs and pink pegs, and it was like it was just for their coats.
I'd take some purple paint and meet it in the middle somewhere.
Actually, I think our nursery was pretty good with that. But yeah, it's jarring when it got to the school. Like I said, the school are fabulous. You know, they've been dealing with us very well. They've been understanding of me as a trans person. Like none of them have used the wrong pronouns for me ever, like in front of me at least, or in written correspondence that I've seen. They still have this kind of default is male, female. Your child is in this world, and no matter how positive influences you can have as a trans person on them, they're always going to pick up this like background noise of boys are this, girls are this. And you constantly have to be kind of like undoing it. You know, you've done so well to teach your child tolerance and understanding, and then they're just picking up all these little bits and you have to weed it out before it overwhelms.
I find that we do a lot of unpicking of that gender norm, like boys and girls colours, and my kid who uses he him pronouns, and we've talked about, like, we've got this book called Who Are You that goes through different gender options and talks about gender presentation and not necessarily being related to gender, and you know, just that there are options. You don't have to be a boy or a girl, and if you are a boy or a girl, you don't have to be interested in specific things because of your gender. He goes, yeah, no, I'm a boy, people guess I'm a boy, and that's all fine. But he'd go to school wearing his dinosaur trousers and his tie-dyed pink and purple top. He tie-dyed himself, and kids would be like, but you're wearing girls' clothes. He comes home going, I can't wear those things for the next non-uniform day because they're girls' clothes. Okay, are you a girl? No, I'm a boy. And they're your clothes? Yeah. So they're boys' clothes because they're your clothes. Oh yeah, they're boys' clothes. You have to go through it over and over again. Here, would you like the pink cup? No, I don't want the pink cup. I want the green cup because green is my favourite colour. You don't have a penis, so you must like pink. Nope, that's not how it works. Like, just no. Whereas your daddy, who does have a penis, his favourite colour for flowers at least is hot pink. So give daddy the pink cup because daddy loves pink. You do spend ages and ages unpicking these things. It's not surprising that the rest of the world ends up in such a kind of binary mess because we have the motivation to keep doing this over and over again so they get it, and so that one day they'll have the confidence to go, actually, you're wrong because they're my clothes and I'm a boy, or yeah, okay, so they're girls' clothes, so what, I like them. But most parents don't have that, and it isn't that they don't care enough, it's that they don't notice it in the same way. It's just one of so many parenting pressures that it isn't top of their priority list. And so beating back the blue is for boys and pink is for girls drops down the agenda.
What it shows across the board is that the level of education that we've got, as in mainstream education, is so binary that unless we want to be progressive across the board, then it's so difficult to get almost like a benchmark across educational establishments, whether that's nursery or primary or secondary. I think because there is no real LGBT level that every school is at, it does mean that the work is left to us, and we end up being the people to kind of inform not only our children but other children, and our children end up informing other children. But then that makes it look like we're parenting differently, and it's not. We're just parenting with a different mindset, differently to how BAME people would have to teach their children resilience in a different way. That's just something we have to do. But it'd be a bit easier if education would kind of take a leap forward, I suppose.
So, Rowan, as the non-binary person here, who has, by the sounds of it, you've been through some stuff just like everybody here today, because you work in this area too. When it comes to how cis-het dominated the parenting world could be, what kind of things have you been doing to fight back against all of that nonsense?
I constantly feel like I'm not doing enough because I'm not doing massive amounts of what feels like loud trans activism. So I am one of the directors of Calm Family, and our directors are a pretty diverse bunch. We're not all cis, we're not all straight. We're a group of parents, and we're an evidence-informed parenting sort of education community. We work from like first principles. We understand how brains develop and how children develop, and we help parents to find ways to balance the needs of their children and their own needs in ways that respect all of the parties involved, which doesn't sound that revolutionary if you're outside of the kind of parenting world. But actually it really is. His approaches to parenting are either like you meet only the baby's needs, always the child's needs, always the baby's needs, and you get massively burnt out parents who don't ever take time for themselves, or it is you put your baby on a schedule, you have to make your baby fit in with your life and not change how you live, and then your baby's needs often get left behind, and babies just don't work that way. I am openly me, and I tell everyone that I'm Jen. I use they, them pronouns. People on the phone, because I work mostly online and on the phone, automatically gender me female. But actually, a lot of the time when you're talking one-to-one to someone, they don't gender you. They don't say she, because there's no need to, because you're there. They just use your name. But if it comes up, then I talk about being non-binary, and I talk about how the assumption that all parents are women or men, or that all people who give birth are women, can be really alienating for trans people. And specifically, I try to encourage people that if they are inclusive, if they are open to trans people, if they are open to gay couples, if they are open to polyamorous families, and they want to be supporting those people, they need to say that. Because if you don't say, I am a safe space for trans people, I've heard so many people go that, you know, if a trans person turns up, we'll change everything we do to fit them. And they probably won't, though. They probably are not going to turn up at your workshop or your cozy group, because it's so normal to not be accepted. It's so normal to have people look at you sideways that a lot of the time you just don't take that risk of going in there and being noticeably different. And for me, that's fine, because I could just go, sure, whatever, I'm a woman. As far as you're concerned, it doesn't matter. No one is going to notice anything different if I do that. But that's what I've done all the time, all my life. It is horrible feeling like that's kind of all invisible. So if you want to be inclusive, you have to be explicitly inclusive. You have to talk about trans parents. You need to mention chest feeding alongside breastfeeding. You need to make that clear, because unless people know that you're a safe space, then don't come. So that is one of my things I'm passionate about.
See, you say you don't do a lot, but that sounds like you do an absolute fuck ton.
It's very quiet, though.
There's a lot of glamour around the more loud stuff, the going on the telly and banging your fist and all that stuff, but the other side of things...
It's just the same as being a trans parent and not being on the front page.
Never yet been on the front page. Daily grind of everyday parenting. Daily Mail hasn't asked me about that yet.
But what you do in the background is for your work and your activism is just as valid, because it's under the radar as much as it is if you're out there shouting and wibbling a stick at a Pride event, you know?
Yeah, I like to think that we are changing the world. And individual conversations, I found, have a much higher success rate at me getting across. I didn't choose to be a gender. I didn't choose not to have this thing that is so ingrained in most people's identity that they can't imagine what it is to not have it. This isn't a thing I did for fun. They get that a lot more, I think, when they interact with a person as a person. It's really the only way I know how to do things as well. So kind of coming alongside people and chatting is how I do all the things I do.
So what resources are out there for transgender parents? Is there anything that has helped you, or is there any words of wisdom you would like to give to any potential about-to-be parents or current parents?
I think I'd say just go with the flow. Try not to kind of, especially in those early stages, try not to overanalyze everything. We tried planning for every eventuality, possibly also because I'm a wheelchair user. You know, we tried planning for what if this happens and what if this happens. And, you know, kids come into your life and they're absolutely crazy and nothing you planned goes to plan. So resources for other people are something that will be key throughout your parenting journey, or that's what I've found so far.
Oh yeah, big time. When I first came in, my situation is obviously different to yours, but when I came out, it wasn't necessarily resources for me because I already had a support group. I already had, I had everything that I needed before I came out. I made sure I have my support network. I think the difficult thing for me is that I had a stepson who was 8 years old. I had a partner, cisgender partner. They had family who really didn't agree. They probably changed their tune now or whatever, but things were made difficult. I went to my GP and asked for help for them, and I was told that my stepson couldn't get help until I had my formal diagnosis,
Oh, wow.
which I clearly wasn't going to get in the next 2 or 3 years. It's like, well, if I'm worried about fucking him up and I want some help to, not fuck him up, then waiting 2 years probably isn't going to help. I must admit, probably about a year or two down the line that I discovered Mindline Trans Plus. They were pretty good. They will help out your friends, your family, anything to do with trans. So if you are trans, non-binary, or if you are a family member or a friend of someone who's trans or non-binary, they are open on a Monday and a Friday from 8 p.m. till midnight, and they're a listening service. So you can call them up and say whatever you fancy. The majority of the people on there are trans and non-binary. I was actually trying to find some resources, but once again, it is pretty sparse out there. There's not an awful lot in terms of contingents for the family, particularly as someone who has come out later in their life after having a child. It is more about supporting the other people. Like Jay said, it's about having the stuff available for them. I think the best thing to do is to try and get in touch with your local groups. As mentioned before, because I've been on the show before, I run a place called Trans Gloucester. Part of the reason why we started up was to give a space for family members and partners, and we're very open about that. We want people to come along. We want trans parents to bring their kids along, so at least the kids can see normality that's there. Same with the partners. It's so important. So if you can't find a telephone number to call up, find out your local groups. Doesn't even have to be a support group. A social group is fantastic, because if you're playing board games together or doing some normal stuff, then it makes things a lot easier for the rest of your family. My brother didn't come to tune with me until much later down the line, because someone on his Twitch stream was a trans person, and they started correcting him every time he misgendered me, and he saw them as a woman probably before he saw me as a woman. And it helps to have a third party involved. It helps to have that person that they never knew before the transition to go, actually, yeah, do you know what? That's pretty much what my sister looks like in terms of what she does and how she acts. That's pretty normal, and there's nothing wrong with that. It makes a huge help.
People have mentioned schools and how supportive schools are, and or not, or how well clued up schools are. Proud Trust, who are based in Manchester, do LGBT inclusive syllabuses for primary and secondary school. And I've done the training for their Agender V2, which is their secondary school sexuality and gender awareness. And it's fantastic. And if you can encourage your schools to send someone on that training and think about how they can work some of that syllabus in, it is just about normalising diversity and making schools represent the broader experience of not everyone is going to be cis and het, not everyone's family is cis and het, and they're fantastic. Look up the Proud Trust.
All right, that's all a bunch of really good advice / resources. Thin on the ground as it does sound to be, there is some stuff out there for people listening, which is great. So, thank you all for joining me and Casey for this lovely chat. Where can people find you online?
At Twitter, I am Mumpty Dumpty. Like I said, Trans Gloucester is a group that I run. Trans Gloss, I think, on Twitter, and Gloss Trans on Facebook.
I'm Jen Littlejohns on Twitter, and I run Calm Family, and it's a slang thing, it's one business, and we're on Facebook and Instagram. Jen Littlejohns on Facebook. I haven't changed my name in real life yet.
Cool. Graham?
Yeah, I don't have anything sort of specific like that, but I'm not normal on everything, which is G, not K, normal. I suppose you can go to my Instagram because I'm doing my art on there, which I want more attention for. But I also hang around in the Discord server. If anybody comes to that, you can definitely come and chat to me. I'm friendly, I promise.
I can confirm Graham is very friendly. Jay, where can people find you online?
So I'm normally found somewhere in the background of Sparkle National Transgender Charity, but I've got a new project that we've just launched called Ability Positive, which is the disabled persons network for Manchester Central and South, who hopefully are going to be linking up with a couple of LGBT venues in Manchester to offer accessible LGBT queer event over the next kind of 2 years, as all of the COVID has put us back a little bit. I'm not on Twitter sphere, but I'm J Lewis on Facebook if anybody wants to shout out.
All right, Kate, Graham, Jay, Ro, thank you so much for joining us. All right, so that is the first panel of the What the Pride that we're doing now. And if you enjoyed that, you would probably enjoy our social media. You know, social media, that thing you do every day that ruins your day. Before it ruins your day, you should follow us on Twitter at What the Trans. You should follow us on Facebook /What the Trans. You should follow us on Instagram at What the Trans. And you should also maybe check out our website, whatthetrans.com. And we also have a Patreon. Obviously, everyone's broke. We're all terribly broke. So if you can't contribute, don't. Seriously, buy food or, video games or other must-need essentials. But yeah, if you fancy throwing a few quid around, you can get us on Patreon at /What the Trans. And also maybe leave a review on whatever app thing you are using. Casey, thank you so much for subbing in for Ashley. Ashley sends her best to you and thanks you for keeping her seat warm. Once again, where can people find you online?
It's Casey Explosion on Twitch, Twitter, just all one word, Casey Explosion.
And there'll be links to all of the things Casey does in the description. So that's our show. Have a good week. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
This episode of What the Trans was written and researched by myself, Michelle O'Toole, and was presented by myself and Casey Explosion. This episode was produced by Joe Ross Barrett and Kate Glanfield, and it was edited by myself, Matt Reynolds, who you can find on Twitter at Chai Tiefling, Ben Swithin, who you can find on Twitter at Ben Swithin, and Fox, who you can add on Twitter at Coldbleed Fox. Also, I'd like to thank our patrons, Alexandra Lilly, Anthony Pena, April Heller, Becky Scott Fairley, Bernard's Pink Jelly Bean, Cassius Adair, Chris Hubley, Claire Scott, Derek Victor, Desiree Markland, Elliot McVeigh, Emily Phillips, Emma Doyle, Ian Coomber, Rowan Littlejohns, Karakan12, Catherine, Laker, Lauren O'Nines, Lewis Brown, Lanos, Maddie Bell, Matt Reynolds, Melissa Brooks, Mike Dickinson, Mina, Molly, Patreon user, Samantha Alice Raisin, Sarah Bedford of Dogs Halliwell, Sophie Lewis, and Tower Watch. Thank you so much for your support. See you next time.